Hey friends, welcome to the December astrology forecast. There are some strong messages this month to slow down, take time to assimilate, and get some extra rest. So let's talk about where that's coming from and what some of the opportunities are for doing some intentional work this month to set up some of the more expansive potentials of 2025. Check out the accompanying blog post at astrologyuniversity.com for a full list of the major aspects and dates this month. Well, we start out with a major ongoing transit right now, Jupiter square Saturn. And this month we get the second exact square out of 3 on December 24th at 14 Pisces and Gemini. This square is extending an invitation to reality test our vision, not to negate it, but to make it more achievable. Saturn can help us become aware of limits that could ultimately be useful to our growth in the same way that a garden needs both water and pruning to stay healthy. We need to balance optimism with realism and find that sweet spot between the two rather than letting one or the other dominate the conversation. This square can bring up questions about morals or ethics. We might face some friction that challenges us to come into more authentic alignment with our guiding principles so that we can create more supportive rules and structures around them. Jupiter will also be retrograde this whole month as it squares Saturn, so let's talk about that some more. I just presented a webinar on Jupiter retrograde at Astrology University, so if you've ever wondered what Jupiter retrograde's all about, check it out. It's available for instant streaming, but here are a few highlights. When Jupiter goes retrograde, it's like our usually encouraging cosmic coach calls a timeout. Jupiter has us imagining unrestricted growth and expansion. When it's retrograde, we're invited to turn inward and to redirect our more outward quest into a more reflective journey. Rather than looking for life's big answers outside ourselves, we're guided to explore our internal landscape to find those revealing messages. We can turn our attention inward to look at beliefs that we've inherited or beliefs that we've accepted without questioning them or making sure that those beliefs are actually in alignment with who we are. Or maybe there are beliefs that we've outgrown that are due for an upgrade. We might find ourselves turning away from established principles that no longer serve our truth. Maybe we seek alternative sources of meaning outside what we've been taught. Sometimes we question our favorite teachers or our gurus or our religion for the first time. If we accept one of these invitations, the inward journey of Jupiter retrograde can connect us more deeply with our own moral compass so that our guiding principles are informed by our own experience rather than someone else's scriptures. With Jupiter square Saturn, this process might feel a bit challenging at times. Remember, it's a process. If you're feeling a little bit unmoored, just trust that you need to do some more integrative work and that it's going to serve you in feeling more solid and clear about what your beliefs are and where you're headed if you do that work. Trying to cling to the old ways may just leave you feeling a bit empty right now. New purpose and potential is emerging. Remember that. So be gentle with yourself. Don't rush it and take time to digest. Journaling is one tool that's pretty great right now to reflect on meaning and purpose. Or if you have religious or spiritual practices that you find supportive, dig into those and then take a break or pull back from those practices that don't feel authentic right now. But do keep your eye on the big questions. Where are you really heading and what does it all mean? The other major news this month is that Mars stations retrograde at 6 degrees Leo on December 6th. Mars is then going to backtrack through Leo until it makes its way to Cancer early next month, January 2025, when it's also going to go out of bounds. So I'll say more about that and both of those things next month. But this month, let's just focus on Mars retrograde and some of the dynamics that are associated with Leo. When Mars is direct, we want to move forward and take actions based on our will and our desire in the moment. But as you might have learned after living a few years, sometimes what we think we want isn't the best thing for us. Sometimes our desires are based on a limited view of ourselves or a narrow idea of what we think it's appropriate to want. The internal shift of Mars moving retrograde can teach us about all of this over time. But read between the lines there. We often learn best through frustration. And when it comes to Mars, by not getting what we want or by having to face competition or maybe conflict as we try to go for what we want, we learn a lot. But stating the obvious, in order to get what we want, we have to know what we want. We're always energetically broadcasting our desire, even if we're not totally conscious of it. Now, if we don't know what we want, well, we broadcast that too. So the Mars retrograde cycle can be seen as a process that helps us get more clear about what we really want. This cycle can also give us a little break from the usual rush of forward momentum in our lives. That is, if we accept the invitation to slow down. We've got an opportunity to reorganize our energy to better achieve our pursuits going forward. So slowing down and maybe even resting more is one important key to making the most of Mars retrograde. Take time to reflect on your desire, on what you want, and what's underlying all of that. Sometimes you'll realize you need to shift gears or to backtrack a bit or revise your plan. If that's the case, just surrender your attachment to the old plan and trust that you're being asked to change it for a good reason. If you stop trying to push and allow the process without resisting it, then you'll be ready to move forward with more clarity when Mars goes direct. The pushing during this time tends to lead to even more frustration. Now, Mars is going to be in Leo all month. This Mars placement comes with a little bit of dramatic flair, and it benefits from confidence and being driven by the heart with warmth and passion. While it's retrograde though, issues might come up that relate to pride or loyalty. Rejection or embarrassment can be especially hard to work through with this placement, but those kind of experiences can also be catalysts, along with the retrograde, that help us regroup and reset. We might ask, where did I go wrong? Were my actions coming from a clean and clear place, aligned with my stated intentions and with my heart? Or were there some personal attachments or hooks in there that I also need to come clean about? Switching gears, I'd love to hear how you did with the out of bounds planets last month, so hit me up in the comments. Well, Venus is still out of bounds as the month starts, and it starts moving out of that range by December 4th. The moon will be out of bounds 3 times this month, from December 1st to 5th in Sag and Capricorn, from December 14th to 18th in Gemini and Cancer, and then once again from December 28th through January 1st, and that's again in Sag and Capricorn. The moon's energy is heightened on out of bounds days, so if you have important mutable or cardinal planets, you're getting some extra stimulus right now every month to grow outside of your own box. Now, the moon's vibes shift quickly, so if you want to observe this energy, you have to be paying really close attention on those days. Notice what's being triggered in your chart each month by the moon in these signs. Then look back over the last year. Has there been a little nudge every month to evolve in new ways in that part of your life? If so, I'd love to hear in the comments. Now, there's just one major ingress this month as Venus moves into Aquarius on December 6th. That's going to lighten up Venus a little bit after spending some time in earthy Capricorn. Now, Venus in Aquarius can express as friendly social energy, but on the day of the ingress, it's also conjunct Pluto, so the lightness probably comes a few days later. Before the month is over, Venus is going to trine Jupiter on December 19th, elevating air experiences like detachment and perspective. And then Venus squares unpredictable Uranus on December 28th, where it might express with a little more restlessness and maybe a touch of aloof detachment. If you get the sudden feeling to bolt in a particular interaction around that day, honor that feeling by stepping back and giving yourself some space to allow for perspective, and then you can retry the connection again later. In Mercury retrograde news this month, one date to watch out for is the inferior conjunction with the Sun, and that always happens right in the middle of the retrograde. This time that's going to take place December 5th at 14 Sagittarius. The day of the inferior conjunction often marks a noticeable turning point where murky Mercury things start to become more clear. Maybe you were stuck because you weren't really sure where that line of thought was leading you when, boom, you get a sense of where it might be headed now. Take this next bit of advice lightly, but my experience has been that you don't tend to get as many Mercury retrograde curveballs after this point. Rudyard taught us that a new seed idea gets planted at that moment, and some part of us is preparing for Mercury's new assignment. In the days just after Mercury stations direct on December 15th at 6 Sagittarius, we start to have the feeling that we're stepping out from backstage and we're ready to start gathering new information and following our curiosity wherever it leads us. Although this month, that sense of something new unfolding is going to be tempered by Mars and Jupiter both being retrograde, both redirecting our energy inward. Mercury is also going to be moving in and out of the opposition with Jupiter this month, which it does on December 4th and again on December 26th. This aspect might actually be helping out our Jupiter retrograde process of reconnecting with our sense of purpose and our guiding principles. Because we need to learn something. We need to revise our perspective. We need conversation and ideas and maybe more information. And then we need to take time to integrate, contemplate, and digest that information. Mix all that in with our lived experience, all of that in service to coming to this new sense of purpose by the end of the process. Now for some Jupiter retrograde inspiration, Joan Gans Cooney, the founder of Sesame Street, was born with Mercury in Sagittarius opposite Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, which is right on her midheaven. She forever altered children's television by applying her Jupiter retrograde impulse to challenge established norms with her vision of programming that combined entertainment and education in an engaging, accessible format. Before Sesame Street, most children's TV programs were primarily entertainment-oriented, without much educational content. In a great example of her natal Jupiter in Gemini, opposite Mercury in Sagittarius, Sesame Street pioneered the concept of edutainment by seamlessly blending educational concepts with humor, music, and appealing characters. This approach challenged the assumption that learning and fun were mutually exclusive in children's programming. In another reflection of Jupiter being retrograde, before launching Sesame Street, she conducted a study on the potential uses of television in preschool education. She interviewed numerous experts in child development, psychology, and education. And that thorough inward-looking process of gathering the knowledge and perspectives from diverse sources points to an introspective orientation and a desire to develop an authentic, well-informed approach. It's a perfect example for understanding this moment in time. And boy, did that approach work out well for her, and she positively impacted generations of children. In this inspiring example of how to actualize a Mercury-Jupiter opposition, the sign placements of Jupiter in Gemini and Mercury in Sagittarius and Jupiter being retrograde all describe some of the unique gifts that she shared with the world. Well, before we wrap up, let's look at dates where you can pick up some extra flow. Choosing a date to take an action is called electional astrology, and we want to adjust our perspective here from trying to control outcomes to instead looking for additional support for all of our actions. Now we can sail successfully through a storm or a clear blue sky. We just have to know how to adjust to whatever conditions are at play. But astrology can help us look out for some more supportive conditions, like some nice headwinds, and then we can choose to set sail at a time when we can get a little boost. And then from there, the rest is up to us. With Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter retrograde this month, there's a suggestion that new starts might be at cross purposes, with this message coming in to slow down, reevaluate, and reconsider. Now, if you have to start something new that's also important, please don't stress out. Sometimes divine timing has a different plan for us than astrological timing. Just take it slow, reflect, and turn inward for any important messages coming through for you specifically. Now that said, there are a couple of great dates for winding things up or for tapping into this retrograde message to assimilate and digest with some good results. One of those is December 16th with the moon in Cancer and the last aspect with the moon a trine to Neptune. This suggests some available energy for compassion, connection, or lyrical soulfulness. Then on December 18th and 19th, we get Venus trine Jupiter in air signs. And that energy might be used to bring some lightness into a situation that was maybe emotionally complicated. There's just a little bit of Venusian objectivity and detachment mixed in with some potential curiosity about the meaning of things that might be an assist here. I get the image of having a conversation with somebody and maybe putting to rest some past conflict or understanding that conflict in a different context where we might make sense of it in a new way so that we can then move forward. If you're picking a chart on that day, maybe wait for the moon to pass the conjunction with Mars. After that, it's going to oppose Venus and sextile Jupiter. Now, Jupiter's tightly square Saturn on those days, so there's also an invitation to approach things with measured optimism and adult calculus. If Saturn's too loud, you might give up before you start, and if Jupiter is too loud, you might think it's going to go way better than it is. And one more date you might want to check out is December 23rd, where we get a grand trine between the Moon, Jupiter, and Venus. Venus and Jupiter start to separate out of that trine, and then the Moon moves into Libra, and it picks up the aspect with both of them again, creating a grand trine. And while that's happening, the Mercury-Jupiter opposition is also at play. So we actually have a kite, which is a really productive, harmonious aspect. So check out that date as well, and maybe go for a chart with either the Moon or Venus ruling. Well, that's it for this month's forecast. Check out our events calendar for upcoming webinars like Plan Your Year Ahead for 2025 with Kelly Surtees. It's an annual tradition and I know you're going to love it. I hope you found some of the ideas in the forecast useful today, and until next time, take good care.